Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Keke Coutee, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 15 waiver wire targets for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're going to be talking about some waiver wire targets at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and defensive positions going into Week 15. We'll talk about players that not only had breakout performances this past week, or could potentially have value towards your roster going forward. These are only players that, of course, aren't owned in very many leagues. As of right now, I would say that they're owned in less than 50% of leagues as it currently stands on Yahoo formats. So I want to go ahead and suggest these players not only to potentially give you extra depth if in fact you're dealing with injuries and or there are better matchups to be played, but also be able to avoid from players that are going up against you. You know, your league mates that are going to be playing you this week. If you can go ahead and prevent them from getting some of these players, it could also help you out in the long run. So we're going to talk about that as we progress. Again, before we begin, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. We are on our way to 36,000 subscribers. So if you have not yet already, click the subscribe button, join the community. We're making fantasy football content for the entirety of the season, all the way through week 17. And then we'll do some content in January, February regarding the NFL playoffs and all that kind of jazz. So again, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Outside of that, again, there are some links down in the description. There's timestamps down in the description for those of you who are looking to find a specific section to be talking about a player. Also, the Discord server down there for those of you who are interested in joining the Patreon, for those of you who are looking to support the channel outside of just, you know, watching, viewing, and that kind of stuff, and find extra content there that I'm creating for fantasy football. Outside of that, we should be good to go. Let's get into our Week 15 waiver wire targets. I do appreciate you guys coming by here. If you've made it this far, well, congratulations. You either had a bye week in the first week or you had clutched out a victory in the first round of the fantasy football playoffs, which again is very difficult considering the inconsistency of players and the amount of injuries that took place just this past weekend. So again, congratulations for making it this far. Let's try to get to the championship game. We got one more week ahead of us. You know, keep it consistent. Let's not play too cute. And let's play our studs and let's get it going. So a couple players that I wanted to mention at the running back position. Again, the running back position has been thin all season long. You can tell via the waiver wire video because, again, as of the players that I've named already this season, I think I've probably mentioned all the players that I'm going to mention right now in prior videos from weeks 1 through 13. I've definitely mentioned all these guys before, and I wanted to go ahead and reiterate it because there is potential for these guys to have value in the coming weeks based on matchups and or opportunity. So the first and foremost running back that I wanted to mention is Jeff Wilson Jr. Now, yesterday's game, he did have 11 rushing attempts, 31 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown against the Washington football team. Also got himself involved in the passing game with 1 reception on 3 targets for 13 yards. Now, even though that's not the greatest performance, the fact of the matter is that Jeff Wilson Jr., despite the presence of a Raheem Mostert in that backfield, has played 40+% of the offensive snaps for 3 consecutive weeks. So he is in the offense. He is getting himself double-digit touches every single week, and he's getting himself more and more opportunity. And honestly, I know Raheem Mostert left early in that game with an injury, but then returned. The whole fact of the matter is that if Jeff Wilson Jr. is going to be some sort of a goal line back, be given opportunities to at least score somewhat in the range of 8 to 10 points every single week, then perhaps he could be of value for those of us who are dealing with injuries to running backs like an Antonio Gibson and or Josh Jacobs, who is questionable all week long, and or other running backs that could end up going down via injury. If you're a Mike Davis owner and you don't have McCaffrey and McCaffrey ends up playing this week, you're going to need another option. This could be one of those for you. So again, they play the Dallas Cowboys this upcoming week. Again, we've talked about it ad nauseum. The Dallas Cowboys are one of the best matchups at the running back position, and a team like the 49ers that love to run the ball seems like a great opportunity for Jeff Wilson Jr. to have himself a week here. We have Zach Moss as our number 2. Now, I know Zach Moss does not play well. I mean, that's 2 weeks in a row in which he really hasn't done much. Against the Pittsburgh Steelers last night on Sunday Night Football, he had 13 carries for 43 yards. Not a remarkable performance, nothing that I'm in awe about, but this is what I kind of wanted to mention with Zach Moss in relation to Cam Akers. Now, Cam Akers is a lottery ticket. We talked about this weeks in advance as a guy that you could potentially pick up, and in weeks 14, 15, and 16, maybe he can end up winning the job off of getting a hot hand. And that's exactly what has happened in that backfield. Very seldom in fantasy football do you have an opportunity to pick up a player that could end up being the heir to the throne and or the actual king of the backfield and take 15 plus touches to the next level and end up riding it into the right direction. I mean, when we look at the upcoming schedule for the Buffalo Bills, the next 2 weeks are the Denver Broncos and the New England Patriots. The Denver Broncos, of course, even though they are a better defense, they still have a couple gaps here and there, and they're a team that you could definitely take advantage of. And the New England Patriots, we just saw, of course, Cam Akers go for 170 on the ground against him. So again, there's always an opportunity that if in fact you can stash Zach Moss on the bench, I know you're not playing him, but it's just a matter of having him there just in case something goes, in the right direction, and perhaps he wins the job wholly and can continue and potentially give us some upside. Moving on to the third option is Peyton Barber. So I'm expecting, of course, Antonio Gibson, the running back that has been absolutely insane this season, double-digit touchdowns, has played out of his mind in comparison to where everyone had projected him this offseason. Again, we knew he was going to be the starting running back, but the amount of touchdowns he's gotten is just crazy. But that's exactly what we're looking for when I mentioned Peyton Barber, touchdowns. Now, unfortunately, this past week, Peyton Barber did have 12 carries for 37 yards, splitting carries pretty much with J.D. McKissick, and wasn't able to find himself in the end zone, but they play against the Seattle Seahawks. I think that there is a very good opportunity for the Washington football team to go and play against Seattle and actually give them some competition. With the way that their defense is playing, the way that their offense, even though they don't make it look pretty, they'll only potentially have 3 good drives in a singular game or in a singular half. And on those 3 drives, they could easily get Peyton Barber into the end zone, accompany that with 30, 40 rushing yards, and get him as a 10-point running back. So again, there's the value that lies within Peyton Barber and the potential if, in fact, Gibson is once again out this upcoming week. We move on to Gus Edwards as our number 4 option. Again, another player that isn't owned in very many leagues as of this current moment in time. Again, he has not played tonight. So tonight's game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns has not taken place. This is being recorded prior to that. So if any player in that specific contest is to have an incredible breakout performance that deems waiver wire pickup status, then we'll mention it on tomorrow's running back video. But as it currently stands, the last time I saw Gus Edwards, 101 rushing yards on 7 attempts against the Dallas Cowboys. He is a pretty decent running back to say the very least. But the reason I wanted to mention Gus Edwards is because Mark Ingram has fallen out of favor in this backfield. It is Dobbins and it is Gus Edwards. And even though Dobbins is the lead back, they play against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 15. And there is a very good opportunity for, as not only just being one of the easiest matchups at the running back position, but for Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins to take over in that game and for both of them to have incredible weeks. We just saw Derrick Henry for over 202 touchdowns against them. Why not the Baltimore rushing attack? I think it's a very plausible opportunity for them to have a breakout game. Gus Edwards could be a value this upcoming week. We move on to our next couple options. We have Tony Pollard as our number 5. Again, with Zeke dealing with his calf injury, not getting much touches, not getting much opportunity, that leading to his success. I mean, if Zeke could get 25 rushing attempts, maybe 30 rushing attempts, then maybe we're going to see a huge game from him. But unfortunately, this Dallas Cowboys offense is not functioning in that capacity. This past week, Tony Pollard, 11 rushing attempts, 39 yards, 2 targets, 2 catches, 9 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. 11.8 points, put up more points than Zeke. And to be honest, it could be the pattern that we continue to see as the season progresses. Unfortunately, they do play against the San Francisco 49ers this week, but Dallas has played pretty well against them in the last couple of years. Maybe they can go ahead and put together a performance that could be favorable for a running back like Tony Pollard, only mainly because, again, he is a handcuff of sorts, but a higher value one because, again, he is still getting as many touches as Zeke at this current moment. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention, again, for the second week in a row is handcuffs. Make sure that you're handcuffing your best running back. I mean, if you are a Derrick Henry owner and you do have the ability to go ahead and pick up his immediate backup, go ahead and do that. If you have an extra roster spot and you're capable of doing so, do that because, again, there is also a possibility that something is, could drastically go wrong in one of these backfields. You want to be, in the position so where you don't have to scramble and hope that you have the right amount of fab dollars and or waiver priority in order to pick up the player that could end up winning or losing you the year. Just wanted to mention that. We can go ahead and move on to the wide receiver position. Again, there are 6 players here that I think are far more valuable than any of the running backs I mentioned. I would rather pick up any of these 6 wide receivers, in my opinion, over any of the running backs because I do think that they have higher upside in terms of performances and points going to be scored in the future. But again, many of you might not need a flex option at the wide receiver position. You might want a running back for an RB2 spot. So just going ahead and throwing it out there. So let's throw out a couple of names that I really do like. Tim Patrick is first and foremost a guy that since week 3 has been the number 28 wide receiver and has been averaging 11.4 fantasy points in a half PPR scoring format since week 3. He's put up a lot of touchdowns just recently, and that isn't an accident. He is one of the more favorite targets of, Drew Lock. And the fact of the matter is they played out of their minds yesterday against the Carolina Panthers. I haven't seen the Denver Broncos offense be that successful in quite some time. But it's good to see because, again, they do have a pretty tough matchup this upcoming week against the Buffalo Bills. But there is a possibility that Tim Patrick, of all the wide receivers in that group in comparison to a KJ Hamler, that even though he scored 2 times last week, or a Jerry Jeudy, there is a chance that Tim Patrick could continue to gain favor. Had himself 5 targets, 3 receptions, 36 yards, and a touchdown. That's another week of 10-plus points, continuing on his streak. And to be honest, I think he's one of the better wide receivers that you could potentially pick up going forward. Another receiver that I really like is Keke Coutee. Now, unfortunately, this past week, he only had 3 targets. I mean, he caught every single target. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 24 receiving yards, had himself a receiving touchdown. Now, the issue that I currently have with Keke Coutee isn't the amount of, points that he put up last week. It's, okay, only 3 targets in a game in which you're getting blown out and you're going to have to pass the entire time. That is a little concerning, but that being said, they do get to play against the Indianapolis Colts. Again, this is the second time in 3 weeks that they'll play against them here in Week 15. The last time we saw Keke Coutee against them, 8 receptions for 141 yards. Maybe he can go again and have himself another great performance. That is why I mentioned him, because again, he still has value in that offense if Brandon Cooks is going to miss more time. We have Gabriel Davis as our number 3 option. Gabriel Davis has scored a touchdown in 4 out of the last 5 games. In the game in which he didn't score a touchdown, he didn't even have a reception. So if we go ahead and we average out his numbers in the last 4 real games that he has played and participated and actually had a reception in, he's been playing out of his mind. He's getting upwards of 10 plus points a game. He's coming off of a performance of 3 catches on 8 targets, 19 yards and a touchdown. Again, whether Josh Allen's throwing him the ball or Cole Beasley's throwing him the ball, he's scoring touchdowns on a consistent basis. And in this offense, playing against Denver this week, he is a pretty good wide receiver 3 potential option going forward. We have Nelson Agholor as our number 4. The reason I wanted to mention Nelson Agholor is because even though he is inconsistent and every other week he is decent, he's had 35 targets in the last 4 games, and you cannot take that away from him. And specifically the last 2 games, he has had 20 targets. So Derek Carr is definitely looking in his direction, getting him the ball. He has 100 receiving yards yesterday on 5 catches, 1 receiving touchdown. I know he had a catch from Zay Jones on a pretty deep pass, but as of right now, it just seems like this offense, they're going to have to air it out. Their defense isn't able to do anything. If I'm not mistaken, they play on Thursday night. So it's going to be a short week. And I think playing against the Los Angeles Chargers, which of course Derek Carr has succeeded against in the past, they're going to have to be able to air it out to compete with this team. And Nelson Agholor is their number 1 option. They're outside of Darren Waller. So he is still up there in terms of opportunity and options in this offense. We have Russell Gage as our number 5. If in fact we do see the Atlanta Falcons shut down Julio Jones, because again, I mean, they're not competing for any titles and they're not, competing for a playoff spot. Russell Gage did come off, a pretty good week here. 7 targets, 5 receptions, 82 yards, and he had himself a passing touchdown. I mean, he had just as many passing touchdowns as Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan had 3 interceptions. Whoop-de-doo. That was an interesting performance. But Russell Gage coming off of back-to-back weeks of a touchdown against the New Orleans Saints in week 13. He had himself 4 catches, 51 yards, and a touchdown. So these are back-to-back weeks of great performances. I know the last time we really could have trusted Russell Gage was early in the season, weeks 1, 2, and 3. But as we get into this late half of the season without Julio in the lineup, there could be a time in which we can ask upon Russell Gage to step into our lineup and put together a pretty good performance here or there. Laviska Shenault is the last wide receiver I wanted to mention. He's coming off of a week of 11 targets, 6 catches for 49 yards. Again, Laviska Shenault always has the upside and the ability to make plays in the running game. We'll get a couple rushing attempts here and there, but the return of Gardner Minshew at the quarterback position is the real reason I wanted to mention Laviska Shenault. Even though they play at Baltimore this upcoming week in week 15, it is going to be a little bit of a tough matchup, but in my opinion, I still see Gardner Minshew as a quarterback that wants to check it down, especially playing against a tough defense like Baltimore. It could end up being in the favor of Laviska Shenault to catch a bunch of targets near the line of scrimmage and at least get a PPR, half PPR base that increases his overall value this upcoming week. Those are my top 6 wide receivers. We can move on to the tight end position now as we begin with Jared Cook. So Jared Cook, again, he's a name that I've mentioned for the last couple of weeks, and I've been excited about him specifically because I was waiting for potentially Drew Brees to come back and give him value. But to be honest, in the last 2 weeks, Taysom Hill has found him in the end zone and has given him a great amount of value in terms of a tight end. As it currently stands in the tight end field, there really isn't many consistent performances. Of course, we have Travis Kelce, and then we have everyone else. And at least Jared Cook has gotten himself more and more assimilated in this offense, especially down in the red zone, coming off of a week of 3 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown. The week prior against Atlanta, 3 catches, 28 yards, and a touchdown. Plays against the Kansas City Chiefs this week. Again, the Kansas City Chiefs have given up a ton of points to opposing tight ends. Just this past week, Mike Gesicki, 5 catches, 66, 2 touchdowns. The week prior to that, I think Noah Fant and the other tight end on that team had themselves pretty good amount of yardage, but the week prior to that, we had Gronk, 6 catches, 106. Darren Waller, 7 catches, 88, and a touchdown, while also Jason Witten scored in that game. So, Kansas City struggled against tight ends. Jared Cook is coming to town. Whether it is Taysom Hill or Drew Brees, he is still the best tight end in that group as of right now. We have Dan Arnold as our number 2 tight end going into this week. So here's my thought process with Dan Arnold. The fact of the matter is that he has scored 4 touchdowns in the last 4 games he has participated in. That in itself is a great value. Now, even though Dan Arnold's only catching 2 or 3 passes a game, it doesn't really matter because at the current juncture of this tight end position, if you can get a tight end that's going to get the influx of 6 points, that is going to make them a top 12 play every single week, regardless. So the fact that Dan Arnold's getting himself, 2 touchdowns the week prior against the Los Angeles Rams, getting himself up with I think it was 19 points just this past week against the New York Giants with a pretty good defense. 2 catches, 27 yards and a touchdown. Plays against Philadelphia, who have given up their fair share of points to tight ends. Specifically, Jared Cook scored against them just on Sunday. So I do think that there is a potential that Dan Arnold could be a value play this week and going forward. Tyler Higbee is my number 3, mainly because, again, the matchup against the Jets. The Jets are giving up the most points to opposing tight ends this season, even though we didn't see anything out of Hayden Hurst. The usage of the tight end position of the Los Angeles Rams is at an all-time high. Both tight ends, as of right now, are playing upwards of 82% of the offensive snaps as of the last couple weeks, and that is going to continue to trend in the correct direction as they play against the Jets. They always want to have a tight end on the field, mainly because they need them as blocking assets, considering their offensive line, of course, Whitworth going down, isn't as strong as it was in the past, but they want to run the ball. They'll do so against the New York Jets, but they'll also be able to air it out to their tight ends. I think Tyler Higbee, between him and Gerald Everett, is the more valuable tight end out of the 2. Unfortunately, he's coming off a performance of only 2 catches on 2 targets against Bill Belichick, but he wasn't really needed to at least help in this offense outside of the first play. What was he? He had a 25-yard reception on the first play of the game. Outside of that, it was all Cam Akers all day. We have Irv Smith Jr. as a number 4. Again, with Kyle Rudolph dealing with injury, there is a potential that we could see Irv Smith continue to be the starting guy here. I know Conklin, the 3rd-string tight end on the team, had himself, 4 catches for 60 yards as well. But to be honest, Irv Smith coming off a performance when he was dealing with injury for the last couple weeks, 4 catches on 4 targets, 63 receiving yards and a touchdown. That's 14.3 fantasy points. That is a great week. Playing against the Chicago Bears is a big deal because they do give up a lot of points to opposing tight ends. Just going ahead and pointing it out, since week 7, the Chicago Bears have given up 6 receiving touchdowns to opposing tight ends. And we're not even going to, mention, I will mention the fact that Jordan Akins, the starting tight end of the Houston Texans, he dropped a wide open touchdown yesterday. Back at the end zone, boom, nobody was even on him, literally just dropped it. So again, it could have been 7 touchdowns since week 7, but regardless, I digress. The whole point is the tight end position has always succeeded against Chicago, and with Minnesota going to town against them, it could be a pretty good game for Irv Smith if, again, Kyle Rudolph is going to miss. We have Kmet as our number 5 tight end going into this week. So here's the thing. Kmet is getting opportunity. Even though Jimmy Graham did score a receiving touchdown yesterday, Jimmy Graham is not the valuable tight end that I want in this offense. Kmet is coming off of back-to-back weeks in which he's had 7 targets. This past week against the Houston Texans, 4 catches for 41 yards. I'll take that. But the week prior had himself 7 targets, 5 catches, 37 yards, and a touchdown. Plays against the Minnesota Vikings. They themselves have given up some points to the opposing tight end position. Gronk just scored a touchdown this past Sunday. So again, there's always a possibility that if Mitch Trubisky continues to look in his direction, could be a value. We have Gerald Everett as our last tight end option. Like I mentioned, they play against the New York Jets. It wasn't long ago. I was back against Arizona in week 13, in which Gerald Everett had himself a pretty good performance. 7 targets, 6 catches, 44 yards. Tyler Higbee in that same game had himself, 4 catches, 24 yards, and a touchdown. So we've seen these tight ends both produce. I think between the 2, I prefer Tyler Higbee, but I still think that Gerald Everett has himself potential value as the receiving threat out of those 2 tight ends to potentially end up having himself a pretty good game here. We move on to the quarterback position. We could probably slide through this quarterback position pretty quickly, beginning with Derek Carr as our number 1. Derek Carr is coming off of back-to-back performances, of just balling out, to be honest. He's coming off of a game against the Jets where he had 3 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. Coming off a performance this past Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts, which was a tough defense in which he had 2 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdowns, over 300 passing yards. The stat that I wanted to mention first and foremost is if you go ahead and eliminate that Atlanta game, Derek Carr's having himself a pretty good last month of the season as of late, in the last 4 weeks. 3 out of his last 4 games, he has had 3 touchdowns. So again, Derek Carr, not a bad play. Plays against Los Angeles this week. The Chargers, they don't have the best defense. I do think that Derek Carr could take advantage of it and have himself a pretty good performance here. Another great quarterback that I wanted to mention, again, a player that in 4 consecutive weeks has thrown for 2+ touchdowns. That's Phillip Rivers, coming off a performance against the Las Vegas Raiders in which he didn't really have to do much, but he still had 244 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Plays against Houston for the second time in 3 weeks. Performed well against them last time. Could once again do it again very easily. We have Jalen Hurts as our number 3 quarterback. My goodness. I mean, the stat that I wanted to mention, the New Orleans Saints held the record for consecutive games without allowing a 100-yard rusher on their defense. I mean, they broke the record early in November for the NFL, like the history of the NFL. I mean, they literally broke the record. I think it was like 55 consecutive games of not giving up 100-plus rusher against their defense. And again, they are the best defense in the National Football League. They are the best run-stopping defense in the National Football League. And the fact of the matter was that not only did Jalen Hurts run for 100 yards, but so did Miles Sanders. Both of them cleaned their clocks. Jalen Hurts, 167 passing yards and a touchdown, 106 rushing yards. Plays against Arizona. Arizona's going to have a tough time bottling them up, as they're not as good at stopping the run, in comparison as New Orleans. But I mean, you go watch the tape. Gabriel Davis may have played the worst game I've ever seen him play in my entire life. I don't know what that defense was, but it definitely wasn't the Saints. And if they go into the actual NFL playoffs looking like that, they're going to be a first-round exit real quick. Our number 4 quarterback is Mitch Trubisky. Now, Trubisky's a little tricky. Again, 1 week he'll show up, only have 1 passing touchdown, and then the following week against Houston, will just ball out. Have himself 267 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 24 rushing yards. Plays against the Minnesota Vikings. Has not played them this season because Nick Foles was in that contest against them. I mean, as it currently stands, it just seems to me that Mitch Trubisky is continuing to put up pretty decent performances. 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he has had 3+ passing touchdowns. So he can continue to stay on that consistent pace and put up some great performances here, and could be a decent streaming option. Jared Goff as our number 5, playing against the New York Jets. Like we've mentioned, again, the New York Jets are one of the easiest matchups. I don't expect the Jets to really put up much competition against the Los Angeles Rams, especially their defense, just being able to force a lot of turnovers, get Jared Goff in more and more advantageous positions, and have him scoring. Again, he's coming off of a week in which he didn't have the greatest performance, but yet again, he did have a rushing touchdown, 1 passing touchdown, and less than 200 yards passing, but I think against the Jets could increase that number. Teddy Bridgewater is our last option here. Again, even though Teddy Bridgewater, didn't have a passing touchdown, he still had 283 passing yards, 31 rushing yards, and a rushing touchdown. To be honest, if you're going to get that 9.1 point swing from running the ball, and then you go ahead and potentially get McCaffrey back this week, I think, and if you get back DJ Moore as well, this offense is going to look way better against the Green Bay Packers than they did against the Denver Broncos. I can assure you that. And I think Teddy Bridgewater will definitely improve based on those returning players. The last thing I wanted to mention is defenses going into week 15. Again, the Cleveland Browns, we've been mentioning them every week. I wanted to mention them again because if they are not owned, they need to be picked up. They play against the Giants and the Jets in the next 2 weeks. The Giants are coming off of a day in which they gave up 8 sacks to the Arizona Cardinals. Don't forget that. The New York Jets, they suck. Let's get it going. Let's pick up the Browns. Let's start them for the next 2 weeks, obviously. The next defense I wanted to mention is the Dolphins. The Dolphins play against the New England Patriots. If the Patriots haven't figured it out and the Dolphins come in and they force Cam Newton to have to pass the ball, it is going to be a nightmare for Cam, because if Patrick Mahomes is showing up throwing 3 interceptions, just imagine what's going to happen to Cam Newton and or Jarrett Stidham. And then the following week, they play against the Las Vegas Raiders. By the time we get to week 16, the Raiders, the wheels could have already fallen off by then if they lose this week and then are potentially eliminated from the playoff contention. So the Dolphins could be in line to, potentially have some pretty good wins defensively here. The Buffalo Bills are the next team that I wanted to mention here as our number 3. Again, they do have the Denver Broncos this week. I think they will be able to force a little pressure on Drew Lock and make him uncomfortable, making him to at least make some more mistakes than he did. And then they get the New England Patriots. Again, if Cam Newton looks like garbage, could be a play there. The next play I wanted to mention, of course, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers play against the Atlanta Falcons. I think anybody can play well against Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is awful. He's looked really bad, and to be honest, if I was the Atlanta Falcons GM at this moment in time, I'd look to try to get rid of him as quickly as I could and start new, but I don't think they'll be able to do so considering the contract. And then they play against the Detroit Lions in Week 16. Matthew Stafford is dealing with rib injury. It might not even be him as a starter there in Week 16. Tampa Bay, not a bad pickup going forward. We have the Washington football team in Week 5, and to be honest, besides the fact that they play against Carolina, that should be a playoff game between those two teams. It is going to be a lower scoring game. Both defenses are going to have to lock in. And I think considering, yes, Russell Wilson did have a 4 passing touchdown game this past week, it is still very sketchy on whether or not he's going to be able to perform at a high level against the defense and a defensive line like Washington. And then Washington in Week 16 gets the revenge matchup for Ron Rivera playing against Carolina. Should be an interesting one there. And then, of course, the Seattle Seahawks playing against Washington. Washington's offense is not great. And then they play against Rams. Could be a lower scoring one, more competitive back and forth. So those are the defenses that I want to mention. Those are the waiver wire pickups for Week 15 of the 2020 fantasy football season. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure you click the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel. Join the Discord server. And until tomorrow, we'll be talking about our running back rankings. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Enjoy tonight's game. Let's hope for a W for all of us. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.